Hey guys, my name is Matt Clevenger, and if you're watching this video, if you clicked on this video, then you are interested in how you can possibly quit smoking. I said how you can possibly quit smoking because my title had something to do with me quitting smoking, and you're interested in that. Now, if you're a non-smoker and used to be a smoker, then you may not have been as inclined because you're done smoking. So anyways, I'm assuming that you're probably someone who wants to quit smoking. So in this video, I'm going to share with you how I quit smoking. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about my background. I used to be in the military. I'm a retired military, and I started smoking about 2 years before I joined the military at 18 years old. And it was I started smoking basically for social reasons. I was into other things. I was smoking marijuana, and cigarettes was one of those things where you use it to cover up the smell of marijuana so that nobody would know that you were a pothead or whatnot. So that's how it happened. I got into marijuana, and my friend said, hey, you need to take a few puffs on this, and I was like, okay, whatever. And then next thing you know, I'm a smoker. Okay, and then I smoked for 11 years. All right, I've been quit for 15 years now, and I'm pretty excited about that. But it wasn't that way for me all the time, because you see, I tried to quit smoking a number of times in my life, and so much so that one time I got a going away plaque from one of the folks at my military units when I was going to a different base, and what they put on there was, to the person who's tried to quit smoking more than anybody else we've ever known. So I've tried a number of different things. I've tried cold turkey, I've tried the patch, I've tried quitting with a buddy, and nothing seemed to work. And then one day in 2005, I kind of tapped into my old roots of the Lord. I was introduced to Jesus when I was young, but then, like most of us, even if you are walking with the Lord now, you kind of go off on your own way, doing your own thing away from the Lord. Well, in 2005, I was coming back to the Lord, and I was reading the Bible because somebody had convinced me that reading the Bible was a good thing for a Christian to do. So I was sitting there reading my Bible, and I was having a beer and smoking a cigarette, and then I just kind of had a thought, this doesn't seem right. This just doesn't seem right. So I started asking the Lord what I could do to give up a couple of these habits. And smoking is the focus of this video, so we'll stick with that. And the Lord gave me a plan. I believe the Lord gave me a plan, and the reason why I think the Lord gave me the plan is because the circumstances that I had the thought of quitting was different than any other. It was in the context of my relationship with the Lord, which makes it unique from any other plan that I've ever tried before. And the second thing that makes this plan unique is that I've never heard anything like it before, because the patch, what it does is it gives you low doses of nicotine, and then it tapers you off until eventually your body doesn't crave nicotine anymore, and it addresses your physical addiction to nicotine. The buddy system focused on more of a support system, and if you don't smoke, then I won't smoke. And it was about controlling the cigarettes themselves. And the reason why that didn't work is because once the other person had a cigarette, the other person would also have a cigarette, because now they were justified in smoking. So that failed too. And then the cold turkey focused on the cigarettes as well, because it just said, I'm not going to do that anymore. But the problem with all three of those is smoking, like anything else that you do in excess, is really closely related to an addiction. And many people consider that smokers are addicted to cigarettes or to nicotine. So how many addicts do you know who have actually been successful controlling their addiction? I bet you that's not many. There's probably a few that have been able to do it. I'd probably be willing to bet that almost everybody has one name, at least in their head, that said that was successful. But overall, I think we could all agree that most of the time it doesn't work out very well when they try to control the addiction, because they're addicts. They have trouble saying no, whether it's alcohol, whether it's cigarettes, whether it's heroin or cocaine or weed, or no matter what it is. It could be food. It could be a lot of different things. But the problem is we just can't say no to what it is that our body craves the most. So the thing that makes this plan different is it has absolutely nothing to do with controlling whatever it is that you're addicted to, and in this case it is cigarettes. It has nothing to do with controlling cigarettes. And I'll say this before we even get into it, I'll probably say it again, is that when I was quitting smoking, I actually smoked more than when I wasn't trying to quit smoking, yet I was still successful. So how is that? Well, let's just go ahead and get into the plan. The foundation of this plan is that smoking is circumstantial. Okay? You can't control the cigarettes themselves, but you can control the circumstances that you allow yourself to smoke. And the reason why we have trouble kicking the habit is because we have a failure to deal with our circumstances in a way other than cigarettes. Now, we could do things like cigarette substitutes, like a carrot stick. I used to have a commercial, or see a commercial that said, just put a carrot stick in your mouth, or chew on straws, things like that, substitutes. A way of coping with your circumstances without cigarettes. But I would actually contend that most of the cigarette substitutes that are proposed out there are not healthy. Like I said, this plan is based out of my relationship with the Lord. My very desire to quit smoking was birthed out of my relationship with the Lord, and so is the control of my circumstances. I dealt with my circumstances out of my faith in the Lord. Okay? So, smoking is circumstantial. So if we can't control the cigarettes, then we can control the circumstances that we allow ourselves to smoke in. So what was it? So how did I do this? How did I incorporate this principle? What I did is I identified the areas of my life that I smoked the most in. One of them was at work. The job I had at the time, most everybody was a smoker, so I had the social pressure. It was a circumstance of social pressures. And then I also had the circumstance of being bored. If you're a smoker, then you know what I'm talking about. A lot of smokers tend to smoke more when they don't have much to do or things to occupy their times. Well, my job was that spot. Another circumstance that I had was a car. I smoked a lot when I was driving. I would smoke when I got in my car. I would smoke before I got out of my car. Sometimes if the trip was long enough, I'd have another cigarette while I was in the car. But driving oftentimes is a trigger for smoking. The other thing, the other circumstance that I smoked in was at home. When I was in my house and I was alone, I tend to smoke more. And that wasn't good for my home. It wasn't good for me. I'm going to sneeze. But that was a spot where I found out that I tended to smoke a lot. And when I was at my house, I would smoke often. And I think it was because I was alone. Again, addressing the boredom. And then the last circumstance that I identified was around people, because it was the social aspect of smoking that triggered me often, because most of my friends were smokers, so anytime I was around them I would smoke more. So I put people in there as a circumstance. So there was 4 circumstances that I identified in my life that I smoked the most in. So if I knew that I could control those circumstances, then I had a great chance at actually quitting smoking, because there weren't very many other times in my life that I would actually smoke. So, how does that apply to you guys before we move on? Well, that applies to you guys because the wonderful thing about this quit smoking plan is that it can be tailored to you. This is something else that makes this plan unique from any other plan, as many other plans are not tailored to you because they're not about you, they're about the cigarettes, okay? But this plan can be tailored. What's your circumstances? Write them down on a piece of paper. When is it that you smoke the most? What is it that when you crave a cigarette the most and you have the opportunity to do it, that you do it most often? Write those down on a piece of paper, and it could be as many circumstances as you want, or it could be as few circumstances as you want. But I will say this, there's a sweet spot. If you have too few circumstances, then you're basically cold turkey. If you have too many circumstances, then it might take too long, and then you kind of just begin to have, you're just making allowances to smoke. Okay, when the object of this plan, or one of the objectives, is to have certain circumstances where you do not allow yourself to smoke, and you do it gradually. So, anyways, after you have those wrote down, what you do is you determine a time period for each circumstance. My time period was 2 weeks, okay? And then I prioritized each circumstance, and I chose my circumstance at work as the first circumstance that I was going to deal with, because I was there for the most time that was when I actually smoked the most in my day, was at work, because I had 8 hours to do it, and I pretty much smoked almost nonstop. Okay, so 8 hours out of every day while I was at work, I was not going to smoke. But after that 8 hours, as soon as I got out of work, I smoked as much as I wanted without guilt. Okay, without guilt. And that's a key thing, is because part of the problem why I believe people fail, is because they have this idea in their mind that they're never going to have another cigarette again, and it creates stress. Right? And stress is one of the factors that makes people go back to smoking even after they've quit. Is something happens in their life that creates stress, and they don't know how to deal with it properly, so they deal with it like they used to. They deal with it with cigarettes. They say, I need a cigarette, and they can't wait until they get that cigarette. So I was able to deal with that 8-hour period because I knew that after that 8-hour period was over, that I could smoke as much as my heart desired. Okay? And I did that for 2 weeks. And then after 2 weeks, I felt like I was comfortable with dealing with, I could get through a day of work with a fair amount of ease, and I could deal with the circumstances of work, of social pressures and boredom. And then I moved on and I added another circumstance to it, and it was my car. So now when I get off work, I can't have a cigarette until I get home, or any time that I'm driving, I cannot have a cigarette. And I drove a lot at this time because I was constantly moving, constantly going everywhere. And if you were to actually add up all the days all the minutes that I spent in my car, it would actually amount to quite a bit. So that was another significant part in my life that I added. And then I spent another 2 weeks of not smoking at work, and then not smoking in my car, dealing with that circumstance. And then when I felt comfortable with that, I added another one. I wasn't going to smoke in my house. And I did that for 2 weeks. So so as long as I was at my house, I did not smoke. So now I've actually got a large part of my time that I'm not allowing myself to smoke, and I've taught myself to deal with whatever circumstances within that time. I've taught myself to deal with those circumstances in a healthier way. And what this did, this actually drove me into my relationship with the Lord, because I had some time, idle time, that I wasn't smoking that I normally would, or I would be in a situation that I allow myself to smoke, and I put myself in the presence of the Lord, and He strengthened me to get through those. So then after that, my last circumstance that I added was around people. Okay, so now basically, there wasn't really a part of my life that I was not, that I had not addressed at this time. And at this particular time, I actually had some people that were moving in with me, a family that was going to live with me for a little bit until they had their house built. So now there wasn't going to be a single time that I was going to allow myself to smoke. But now this was different, okay? It wasn't, even though I knew I wasn't ever going to have another cigarette before, again, I didn't have that stress because I had already taught myself how to deal with the circumstances of life in a different way, something without cigarettes. So I was able to go in this last circumstance knowing that I wasn't going to have another cigarette without the stress that I wasn't going to be able to cope with life, because really that's the root cause. We're coping with life in a way that is not healthy. We've used cigarettes for it, and we all have triggers. So at this point, people were going to move in, so I knew that I was done forever. And I've been quit for 15 years, and it only took me 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks to quit smoking. And like I said, you might recall earlier in this video where I said I actually smoked more when I was quitting than I did when I was smoking. And that's absolutely true. However, I mean, I think I got up to 3 packs a day, because no, I wasn't 3 packs a day. I was like 2 packs or more, and I was about 1.5 packs a day smoker. So I was about 2 to 2.5 packs a day in the early part of my quitting, and then towards the end of it, it got less and less. And the reason why is because there was actually less time in a day, less circumstances allowed myself to smoke, and I could actually, and then it started tapering down, and eventually to nothing. So that's my story on how I quit smoking. But let me tell you about some other triggers that might be for you, that kind of flow into some other areas and other circumstances that may be related to your smoking. One of them is alcohol. A lot of folks I know, and it was for me as well, but like I said, I was coming back to the Lord, so I wasn't spending as much time in the bar, so that wasn't really a relevant circumstance for me anymore. But alcohol can be a big thing for people, anytime they have a drink, they automatically just kind of want to have a cigarette because it goes hand in hand, right? And some people are actually able to some degree, control that circumstance, and that's the only time they smoke. But that just goes to show the power of alcohol as it relates to smoking. So oftentimes, even if you do have some success with quitting, you have a late night with the guys or the girls if you're a gal, and you have a little bit too much to drink, and the next thing you know, somebody offers you a cigarette, and your guard is down, and you take that cigarette, and next thing you know, you're back to smoking again. So what would I say about that? How would you deal with that circumstance? Well, I'd say this. I'd say if you've already dealt with it, do your best to limit your exposure to that circumstance. Do what I did. Maybe you shouldn't spend as much time in the bar, and this isn't a judgment, this is just the reality. If you know that alcohol is a weakness with your smoking, then maybe you need to limit that circumstance, your exposure to it. Now, all of my circumstances, I couldn't eliminate those, but alcohol is one of those things that we actually have power. And I'm not saying that you have to quit drinking altogether. All I'm saying is understand that that's a trigger, and you might minimize your exposure until you feel confident that you can deal with that circumstance, because that's the key. If you can't control the drinking, or if you can't control the cigarettes, then you have to control the circumstance or the amount of exposure that you have to that circumstance in order to have success over it. Some other things, there might be significant life events that might go on that bring you back to smoking after you quit once. Maybe a divorce, a death, maybe a horrible breakup, you name it. There's all kinds of different life circumstances out there, but there's one thing that I want to encourage you in, and it's just the first principle that I talked about in this video, and that it's all of our addictions are circumstantial. So if we find ourselves addicted to something, we have to find another way to deal with that circumstance. And I would propose to you that it's the Lord Jesus Christ. He's made the biggest difference in my life, and He's changed everything in my life and my ability to cope with the things that life throws at us. And trust me, I know that life can throw much at you, and it gives you every reason to go back to addiction, to anything, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let me encourage you in that it doesn't have to be that way. There's better ways to deal with those things, and I contend that it be the Lord Jesus Christ. So if you don't know the Lord, if you're watching this video and didn't realize that this was actually going to be about Jesus, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to blindside you on that, but I'm not sure if I said in the beginning of the video, but this video this quit smoking plan, I believe, was given to me by God. I've never heard it from anyone else, and it has nothing to do with the addiction itself like many other methods have. It has to do with dealing with your circumstances, and it's the Lord that made the difference in my life. So if you don't know the Lord, I would just let you know that Christ died for sins once and for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, and it's to bring you to God. So if you feel far from God, if you feel like you can't deal with life circumstances in any other way than your addictions, please consider a relationship with the Lord Jesus, because God has made a way for you to come into His comfort, His power, and His ability to overcome anything in your life through the man of Jesus. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I really hope it was something new for you. I hope it encourages you and gives you new hope to overcome any addiction that's in your life. And I would love to field any comments that you might have. Just put them in below, and I will make sure that I connect with you and contact you back with another comment and encourage you in any way that I possibly can. So anyways, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you like this advice and you'd like to see more out of me, or want to know more about the Lord Jesus, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, maybe like this video, and share with your friends. Lord bless. I'm Matt Clevenger, and I'm out.